I've taken a quick break from editing a video because I want to share a story with you. A story about failure and the lesson, a very important lesson, that I learned from said failure. This lesson was inherently learned by a far, far younger version of myself. However, unfortunately, it would take many, many years for me to understand the lesson that could be learned from this experience. I want to take you back to when I was 14 or coming on 15. I was in the grammar school system and I wasn't the type to sort of fit in such scenarios. Sure, I was reasonably intelligent, but I wasn't academic and I certainly wasn't very sporty, and these were the two things that the school pinned major importance upon. Because of my inability to fit in, I never really felt a huge amount of confidence, and this was exacerbated when I was bullied for several years throughout the school process. This left my self-confidence on the floor. I had very little in the way of self-esteem, and I didn't feel like I really had an awful lot of positive qualities that I was able to contribute to the world. Most importantly, and certainly in the eyes of a teenage boy going through adolescence, I felt I had very little to offer members of the opposite sex, and as such, I had zero confidence when it came to approaching girls. I didn't know how to approach girls. I didn't know what I would say to them, and certainly had I made any form of advance or asked out any girls on a date, I would have expected a negative response, dare I say even a mocking one. I took on a Saturday job in a shop in town when I was 14, again coming on 15. As soon as I started there, I noticed a girl who worked there. She was incredibly pretty. She was very popular with the other members of staff. She was very chatty, very friendly, very communicative, very popular. And whilst we could share small talk, albeit in a sort of slightly shy way from my part, she was perfectly pleasant, but I didn't believe for any moment that I would get a positive response should I try and take that one stage further and ask her out on a date. So I never did, with the fear of rejection, feeling that one more rejection from a female would possibly lower my self-confidence to irrecoverable levels. Fast forward a little while, and after spending Saturday in, Saturday out, looking longingly at this girl, wishing that I had the courage, or indeed the self-worth to ask her out. I was a spotty 14-year-old teenager. I had bad skin, I had braces, glasses, I had a receding hairline at the age of 14. Now, if you're struggling to imagine that, look at me now, rewind 30 years, and maybe add some braces, and you've got a pretty good idea. But a new girl started, a new Saturday assistant started. Now, dare I say that objectively she was far less attractive. She certainly didn't seem to be as friendly. She didn't get on as well with the other staff members. She wasn't the popular one. And whilst we shared a few words every now and then, it was purely in a sort of work basis. However, because I felt that this girl was, dare I say, more on my level, I did, being a sort of slightly desperate male, desperately looking for female attention in an adolescent time that's incredibly difficult for teenage boys and girls. I asked her out, and, much to my surprise and dare I say stifled delight, she actually agreed, and we agreed to go on a date to the cinema and then maybe for a drink afterwards. On the night of the date, she was late. She turned up probably about half hour late, but she did show up. She clearly made precisely zero effort in her appearance and getting ready. No makeup, her hair was scrunched back, and I was be amazed if she'd actually even bothered to have a shower. Now, it would be incredibly shallow to say that I expected her to be dolled up to the nines and looking amazing, but it's clear that she hadn't placed any importance on our encounter. Because she was late, we were late for the start of the film, and certainly the date hadn't got off on the best possible foot. But here I was, adolescent, spotty, teenage bloke with bad skin, receding hair, glasses and braces, who was out on a date. Yes, it wasn't the date of my dreams, it wasn't the pretty Saturday assistant I'd been longing after, but it was a date, so I was going to persevere. After the film concluded, I suggested that we go for a drink. It's back in the time when you could find a bar that would serve you underage. We found a table at this bar. I went to the bar, bought us drinks, took them back to the table. I spent the next hour or so forcing small talk, trying to engage her in some form of conversation, attempting to find some sort of neutral ground, something that we could talk about, that maybe we could base some form of lasting relationship upon. In the end, after several failed attempts, I went for the jugular and just asked her straight out if, she would want to go on a second date. I said, quite disingenuously, I told her how much I liked her, which was, like I say, disingenuous. But once again, I, make no apologies for the fact that I was a, spotty 14, 15-year-old boy lacking in self-confidence. She declined. She turned me down on the offer of a second date, and aside from a few awkward conversations that are completely work-related in following Saturdays, we never really engaged in conversation again. Now, the Disney ending to this story would be that a couple of Saturdays' time, the pretty girl that I'd always longed after instead asked me out on a date. But that didn't happen. In fact, I think a few weeks later she went out with some other boy who was probably older, didn't have glasses, braces, all the rest of it. Okay, but there was a lesson to be learnt here. There was a lesson that I try and live by now, and a lesson that took many, many years to actually materialise after this experience of teenage Phil. I'd not gone after what I wanted. I really wanted a date with this pretty girl, but I'd not gone after that with fear of failure or fear of rejection. Instead, I'd chosen what I believed to be the far more obtainable, the far safer option. I'd asked out the plainer girl on a date, and I'd still failed. I'd still ended up back in the same situation, and I had been rejected. Now, whilst I fear that this video may sound like it's objectifying women, I can apply this to all avenues in life. It could be asking someone else on a date. It could be applying for a job that you fear that you may not have relevant experience or qualifications in. It may be relocating, moving to a different part of the country or a different part of the world altogether. But the lesson is this, and it's something that I've heard Jim Carrey speak about far more articulately. We can fail in life at something that we'd never really wanted in the first place. So why not risk failure at something that we truly want? That could be a job, but it could be asking that person out on a date. Maybe it is pursuing a hobby that we want to be so much better at but fear we never will be. Maybe it is relocating to another part of the world. It's perfectly possible to lump ourselves with the safe option, thinking that that's the route of least resistance and bears the minimal chance of failure. But it's still possible to fail at what you don't want. So why not attempt to achieve what you do want? Ultimately, if it doesn't go to plan, you're back to square one, where you end up anyway. Stay safe and sane. All the best.